Hello, welcome to another edition of Trial by Magus. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of three French aircraft that you can currently encounter in the game. This is the SNCAC NC-1070, aka the Frog, aka the Enterprise, aka, well, insert French joke here. This is a very interesting aircraft. It was the first French aircraft available in the game, actually. Brought in as a reward, one of three possible rewards from the War Cache event. It was the only attacker aircraft model available, and I actually acquired it at that time because it was the only way to get my hands on a French aircraft. And I have a partiality towards attackers that can be played aggressively, and the statistics I was looking at on the NC-1070 definitely indicated that it would play a lot like my beloved German attack aircraft. Now let's take a look at what we've got here. It's a rather squat, silly-looking thing. Looks kind of like a double-decker bus with wings. Now there's actually three crew positions on this thing: pilot, bombardier, and gunner here in the back. Now all three of them are modeled, but like the other three crew aircraft in the game, the observer slash bombardier does nothing, although he does show up if you take a look at the front of the aircraft in battle. Armament-wise, the NC-1070 comes with a pair of 30mm cannons that fire over the top of the chin of the nose here, mounted on the sides of the aircraft. They are rather quick firing and cool off very quickly and have a long overheat cycle. There's only two of them. They are rather accurate at ranges inside of 600 meters, although they can strike targets out to 800. I tend to use the longer range against ground targets, and when firing against aircraft I try to get closer so that more of the shots hit. Out of the back of the aircraft, it has a pair of 20mm cannons that fire out of a ball turret that has one of the best firing arcs in the game. It can fire underneath the aircraft, to the sides, directly behind, and above to about this point. So if you're looking directly down at it, you'll be fine because the tail fin there, the horizontal stabilizer, actually blocks the field of fire. Now historically, this aircraft entered testing after the end of World War II, 1947. A single prototype was built and test flown with the piston engines you see here, and underwent testing until it suffered a belly landing at the end of one of its flights and was rendered inoperative. The testers decided not to repair the airframe and to move directly on to the second prototype, which was powered by British Rolls-Royce Nene turbojet engines. And that aircraft also suffered a similar fate. The increased thrust from the engines provided it with greater speed and altitude handling, but the airframe itself just could not handle the increased thrust, and the aircraft underwent structural deformation, is what the encyclopedia entry described, while it was in flight. And, well, we're 50, 60 years removed from those events now, but definitely if I'm a pilot of an aircraft, structural deformation is definitely not something I want to hear my airframe being prone to. So the entire line was scrapped and not pursued any further. Now, in World of Warplanes, the NC-1070 has one of the lightest gun armaments for an attack aircraft. That is counterbalanced, as I mentioned earlier, by their long overheat cycle and how quickly they cool down once you cease firing. You also carry a hefty bomb cargo, 8 100-kilogram bombs. Now, a 100-kilogram bomb is not that much at Tier 8. However, it is enough to finish off popping a ship target if you have concentrated your guns into just hitting the main hull hitbox, and then you drop a bomb on it as you go by. Those 100-kilogram bombs are also useful for swatting fighters off of your tail if a skilled gunner and a pair of 20mm cannons isn't enough to scare them off. Generally speaking, I have no problem annihilating fighters with my tail gunner, so the bomb kills would be best reserved for other aggressive attack aircraft if you can lure them in close enough to your backside, or heavy fighters if you can time the drop well enough to catch them as they complete their pass right behind you. Tactics-wise, personally, I play this thing a lot like a German attacker. Phase 1 of the battle, I seek out my opposite numbers on the enemy team, shoot them down, and then I go about collecting my ground targets, because while this thing is a competent destroyer of ground targets, it is not nearly as good in that role as, say, an IL-20 would be. If you are fighting against this thing, my advice to you would be, don't take anything for granted. She's a lot more agile than she appears, and no matter which end of the aircraft is pointed at you, you've got a lot of damage coming your way. Those 20mm cannons on the back have a wide range of fire, a pretty long firing range, and a long burst cycle on the outgoing damage. If the player has improved that with good gunner abilities, the backside of this thing is just an enormous kill zone. Likewise, the front end has those fairly accurate 30mm cannons, which, with the long overheat cycle, it's not going to take much for it to do some pretty good damage to your aircraft if you make the mistake of allowing this thing to point its nose at you. And like the German attackers, this thing is capable of pointing its nose up in the air and keeping it there for as long as it has boost. And being a twin-engine aircraft, she's got a lot of boost available to use aggressively. Now, for pilot skills, I've gone with a unorthodox setup here. My pilot has Protection Expert because, as you can see, I have two pieces of equipment on this aircraft that skill will synergize with nicely. The reinforced airframe here and the improved covering. Now, because it has such a good rear gun on it, I opted for rear gun stabilization to increase its range rather than the improved armor plating. Other abilities on my pilot, I have opted for cruise flight because this aircraft is quick for an attacker, but you can always benefit from being quicker. It allows you to play the interceptor role against enemy attack aircraft that much better, and once that's finished, that cruise flight ability will allow you to get across the map towards the targets you want to take out on the ground that much quicker. I have no additional points chosen at this point, but other items I would recommend on this aircraft would be, the engine boosts could be good for you. The firefighting skill actually could be of use here because you have a lot of hit points, giving you chances to get set on fire multiple times, and the aircraft is pretty agile, so you can meet the requirements for getting that ability to go into action and put that fire out pretty quickly in this thing. Other things for the gunner. Here I've selected armor to increase the damage further, quick reflexes to get the gun firing half again as quicker when an enemy aircraft enters the rear gun's firing arc, and after this I intend to get the extended range ability, Ballistics Expert. Just an outstanding ability for a dangerous rear gun to have. And at some point way in the future, I will eventually get the weakest link put on there. All that being said, I have a battle for you in the Enterprise here that I think you will find entertaining, and it demonstrates the strengths of the aircraft and its anti-GA ability, the ability of its tail gunner to take out chasing fighters, and its ability to pound on ground targets when it's left alone. This is from the Japanese threat event, so this is an all-allied team versus an all-Axis team. Hope you enjoy the show. Good hunting.
This is the end. Hold your breath and count to 10. Feel the earth move and then hear my heart burst again. For this is the end. I've drove and dreamt this moment, so I would do I want them swept away. I'm stolen. Let the sky fall when it trembles. We stand up. Together, let the sky fall when it